When people talk about the comedy genius of 1920s Hollywood, they're usually referring to Charlie Chaplin. And that's not unfair. He was in many ways creating the blueprint that actors and filmmakers would be following for decades. Without Chaplin, the entire landscape of cinema and celebrity culture would look very different. But this isn't about him. And while the filmmakers that we're talking about today certainly weren't perfect, Chaplin's a whole situation I'd rather not get into. Honestly, I think it's a real disservice that culturally we've crowned one person to be, the king of comedy, while the others have been relegated to historical footnotes. Maybe worth mentioning, but certainly not delving into. And comedy is subjective, art is subjective, so this is just my personal opinion, but I actually like the movies of these filmmakers that we're talking about today better. Obviously, we're talking about Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd. My initial plan for this video was to talk about the most famous movies of theirs that have the most famous stunts in them. In the case of Buster Keaton, that would be the house falling around him in Steamboat Bill Jr., and for Harold Lloyd, it's him hanging from the clock in Safety Last. Those both have really interesting stories behind how they specifically did those stunts. In the case of Buster Keaton, they literally nailed his shoes down so that he wouldn't get crushed when, that wall fell. And then for Harold Lloyd, they did use a lot of camera trickery and had a stack of mattresses just off screen. So if he fell, he at least was falling on something soft and not, concrete. But those were still both incredibly dangerous stunts. And those were things that you could never get away with doing today. I mean, insurance alone, can you imagine? But then I thought, or I could just make a video about the movies of theirs that I like best. So you're gonna get an earful about the Cameraman and the Kid Brother instead. Buster Keaton was known as the Great Stone Face, but his catalog actually shows just how expressive he could really be, and the Cameraman is no different. But film historian Glenn Mitchell actually points out that a lot of the sequences in this film, especially near the end, play out very similar to a Harold Lloyd movie, which might be why I like this movie so much. Gun to my head, if I had to choose a favorite, I would probably go with Lloyd, but we'll get to him later. The premise of the film is that Keaton, a street photographer, meets and is immediately smitten with a young woman, Sally, whom he meets while working. He discovers she works at a nearby news organization along with the character Stag, who will be Keaton's romantic rival. Also, I have to shout out this framing. Impeccable. Managing to have all three of the characters in just the right spots to see each of the actors' facial expressions is amazing. After inspecting Stag's camera, Buster asks if he can get a job there, but learns he needs his own camera. As a new camera is out of his budget, he ends up with an ancient model he buys from a pawn shop. He returns to the office and meets the editor, who is less than impressed. But while he's there, the employed cameramen are all running out to get footage of a nearby fire. Sally encourages Buster to go too, insisting that the company will buy anyone's good footage. After a misunderstanding with a cop, he follows a fire truck that unfortunately takes him back to the station. Determined to get prime footage, he goes to Yankee Stadium only to discover there's no game being played, so he goes on to mime an entire game himself until he gets caught and tossed out. This was one of the few scenes that Keaton got to improvise, as MGM wanted everything scripted out beforehand for efficiency. He shows the footage he's filmed for the news organization only to be ridiculed for how bad it is, but Sally seems to genuinely be rooting for him and convinces him to keep trying. He asks her out only to discover she already has a date planned for his proposed time, but she asks for his number. So the next day he waits by the phone before trying to break open a piggy bank, the other improvised scene, which naturally doesn't go according to plan at first. When he does manage to break it open, he collects the money when the phone rings. He runs down to the shared phone in his apartment building, but the call's not for him. The second call is, though, and it's Sally. Before she's even finished the call, he's run all the way to her home. I also want to call out this really impressive series of shots that happens here where he's running down the stairs and the camera is actually moving with him. That's really difficult to do. It wasn't unusual at the time to have, no wall there. It's not an actual house, obviously it's a set, but to have those levels and even an exterior shot like this where he's going outside from being inside and having the camera not just panning but actually moving up and down, especially considering when this movie came out, is just really impressive. He proceeds to wait for her to get ready while he is swarmed by her housemates before making a perfectly timed escape. The couple attempts to board a bus, which results in this truly adorable sequence. Keaton purchases 2 tickets to a public swimming pool and goes to change into his swimwear. He and another man try to use the same changing room, and since neither is willing to let the other man have the room for himself, they both attempt to change in the same stall. They get their swimsuits switched in all the commotion, but Buster finally gets to the pool where Sally is getting quite a bit of male attention. Wanting to impress Sally, Buster takes to the diving board only to belly flop into the pool below and lose his oversized swimsuit in the process. While in this condition, several ladies swim past him before he finds himself reunited with Sally, who's ready to walk on the beach, unaware of Buster's predicament. He steals part of another swimmer's less revealing suit and escapes the pool to change, though his strange outfit does not go unnoticed. Once in his street clothes, he finds Sally being chatted up by another man, and we get a series of brilliant gags as Buster gets rid of him and quickly ushers Sally away. They try to get a ride in a public car, but it's too crowded. While they wait for another car, Stag comes along in his own car offering them a ride. Buster has to settle for the rumble seat just as a heavy rain begins to pour down. The trio stops at a cafe, but Buster says he's going to head home as he's a bit damp. But while Stag heads in to get a table, Sally gives Buster a peck on the cheek. While walking home, he has another encounter with the cop who thinks he must be insane at this point, but Buster is able to slip away. The following day, someone from the paper gets a tip that something may be going down in Chinatown and calls the front desk, where he gets a hold of Sally, telling her to send a cameraman over, and she sees an opportunity to help Buster out, telling him to go down to Chinatown with his camera. I just realized at this point when I was writing the script that both of the movies I'm talking about feature monkeys in prominent roles, and while researching I found out that this is the same monkey wearing the same sailor costume as in The Kid Brother. Apparently, the little actor's name is Josephine, unless it's Chicago. It seems we're not 100% sure. In this film, Buster quite literally runs into an organ grinder with a trained monkey. When they fall on the monkey, the organ grinder is distraught, claiming Buster killed it, and a nearby officer demands that Buster pay the man for the monkey. Buster pays and continues on his way with his camera and the dead monkey, except of course the monkey is not in fact dead. The monkey leaps onto Buster, startling him so badly that he knocks over the antagonistic cop to the monkey's amusement. Buster doesn't want to be caring for a monkey, but it seems she's very attached to him, so he allows her to tag along. I will note that some of the Chinatown sequences aren't the most culturally sensitive, so just be aware as we head into this portion of the film. But basically, 2 rival Chinese gangs are at the parade being held, and Buster finds himself between them. But he's here to do a job, so he begins to roll tape. In this scene, we get another iconic stunt, and we know that somewhere in this scene he sprained his wrist, and it may well have happened here. While filming the fight, when one of the gang bosses sends a series of thugs after Buster, he is able to trick them into fighting each other. He takes cover in an opium den where the gang finds and traps him just as the police arrive. Unfortunately, one of them is the villain officer who tries to cart Buster away. At this point, the news crew arrives and offers a way for our hero to escape once again. All the cameramen return to the office, and Buster tells the editor that he has prime footage of the gang war. But unbeknownst to him, the monkey swapped out the film. He discovers this in front of the editor, and it's also revealed that Sally gave Buster the tip instead of one of the reporters, getting her in trouble with her boss. Buster, trying to mitigate the trouble, leaves and tells Sally he won't bother her anymore. Sally is torn as she genuinely likes Buster, but realizes how his noble attempts to join the news crew inevitably end in disaster. Days later, Stag and Sally are out at a boat race that Buster is visiting to try and film footage. While there, Buster discovers the footage that the monkey had switched out. He still has it. He gets towed to the shore by the organizers of the boat race, annoyed that he's in the way, and so he instead sets up the camera on the beach. He captures Stag mishandling the boat and pitching himself and Sally into the water. Stag cowardly swims to shore to save himself, leaving Sally to flounder behind. Buster decides to leave the camera and take his boat into the water to rescue Sally. Sally is unconscious by the time Buster reaches her, but he brings her back to shore, trying to revive her. He runs to the drugstore to find something to help, and while he's gone, Stag finds Sally, who wakes up. She believes he saved her, and Stag is all too happy to lie and say he did. Buster returns to see them walking off together. The frame then pans out in a surprisingly sophisticated shot that reveals the monkey at the camera, evidently having recorded the whole thing. But Buster, of course, doesn't know this. And by the way, what a gorgeous shot. Buster sells the film camera back and returns to his tintype photography. He leaves the film he took at the newsroom with the message that the editor can have it for free. Expecting it to provide a laugh, the editor watches the footage along with Stag and Sally, who had also been in the room. They are shocked to see the footage he managed to capture from the fight in Chinatown. The same tape goes on to show the scenes the monkey filmed at the boat race, and Sally learns the truth. The editor is so impressed by what he sees that he sends Sally to find him and bring him to the office at once. She finds him taking a man's photo and thanks him for saving her. She tells him to return to the office where there's a huge reception waiting for them. As they walk down the street, a parade passes by. Buster mistakenly believes it's for him and begins waving his cap at the crowd with humility. And that's where the film ends. This was the first film that Keaton did with MGM, and I was disappointed to discover that he actually had a really negative experience working with them. He in the past had produced all of his films independently, which gave him a lot more creative freedom. He would do a lot more improvising and figure things out as he went along, and he just didn't really get the chance to do that once he was working with the studio. Chaplin and Lloyd actually both urged him not to sign, and I think that this is worth noting in case this wasn't clear, because I feel like nowadays people tend to feel they need to pit these three against each other. Like back in the day, they all knew each other. They were all big admirers of each other's works. They were genuinely looking out for each other, and they were genuinely worried about what might happen to Keaton and his movies if he signed with MGM. But anyway, MGM demanded that Keaton work in a much stricter way than he had in the past. He had to have a fully written script, and he had to stick really closely to it. Whereas in the past, he could have, a general idea and figure out entire sequences as he went along. But that's not efficient, and it's costly. And he admitted part of the reason that he, couldn't continue producing movies himself was because it was too expensive. Another kind of screwy thing that happened was MGM assured Keaton that he could continue to use his crew. But a lot of the times when Keaton would be, ready to start filming, his crew would be off doing other productions because they were now, MGM employees. All in all, Keaton did say of working with MGM that it was the worst mistake of his career. That being said, it is possible that the casting and characterization of the female lead and love interest, Marceline Day, was a studio choice. And if that's true, I think it was a really good one, honestly. I think she as an actress is great. And, I think that the character is actually a very strong one. Keaton's characterization is fairly typical for him. I think he was a little bit different from Chaplin or Lloyd in his shyness. He's a little bit more bashful than they ever tended to be. To again quote Glenn Mitchell, he said, he didn't really play the aggressive tramp character like Chaplin or the fearless go-getter like Harold Lloyd, and suggested that, maybe this characterization was a little bit more like Keaton's actual, off-screen personality. And I was thrilled to find out that Keaton personally did think that The Cameraman was one of his best movies, because I would 100% agree. Harold Lloyd often played a character called the Boy. He was sometimes a city boy and he was sometimes a country boy, but he was always the boy. And I would say actually he probably played the city boy character more, but in this particular movie he's a country boy. He, more than Keaton, really models himself closely off of Chaplin in the beginning. He had a character called Lonesome Luke, who was essentially the tramp, except instead of wearing really baggy clothing, he wore really tight-fitting clothing. But he didn't like that. He didn't like that he was basically doing someone else's character, and it wasn't until he found a unique character to play himself by donning the round glasses and the straw hat that he, really started to find the success he was looking for. Of the trio, Lloyd is probably the one best known for having the craziest, most dangerous stunts. He's known as the king of daredevil comedy. And I wanted to bring it up before the movie because while this movie isn't particularly known for having crazy daring stunts in it, he did have a physical impairment for pretty much all of his movies that have survived that I think is really well hidden. Like, unless you know to look for it, you might miss it. Back in 1919, which was before any of the surviving movies that we have of him, he had an accident. He was doing a publicity photo shoot, and he was taking a picture where he was holding what he thought was a prop bomb, and he had a cigarette in his mouth, and he lit the prop bomb to make it look like he was using the bomb to light the cigarette. The bomb was not just a prop. It went off in his hand, and it was really close to his face. He, was taken to the hospital. At the time, he was temporarily blind, and doctors figured, well, that's going to be it for that acting career. The biggest issue was his hand. It was his right hand, and he was right-handed, and it blew off his thumb, his index finger, and part of the palm. So for Lloyd's career, like anytime you see him, like when he's hanging from the clock, he's doing that with 1.5 hands. So for close-ups, he would use a hand double. And outside of that, he actually had a pretty good looking prosthetic. Like if you know to look for it, you'll notice it. So now you'll notice it. But it's really easy to miss, and considering, the day, and it was black and white, so that probably helped to a certain extent. But like you don't really think about it when you're watching the movie. So it's just a fun little tidbit to keep in mind as we go through the film. The movie opens by introducing the performers of a traveling medicine show. The man who ran the show died, so now his daughter, Mary, is in charge. Mary is played by the endearing Jobina Ralston, who is my personal favorite of Lloyd's regular leading ladies. With Mary is a rather crooked snake oil salesman type, Flash, and the obvious villain, Sandoni, who performs as the show's strongman. Oh, and there's Josephine again. Then we meet the strapping sheriff and his 2 strapping sons doing manly things before being introduced to Harold. He's meant to be the opposite of his father and brothers, but is definitely the brains of the operation and has devised an ingenious method for doing the laundry. He clearly idolizes his family while they barely give him the time of day. When he realizes a goat is eating his father's best shirt, only for it to then fly away when tied to a kite, a brilliant chase sequence ensues. Harold has a run-in with Hank, the town bully, but manages to outsmart him all along the way and use him to retrieve the runaway laundry. The medicine show rolls into town planning to get a permit to perform, but they're warned by a passerby that the sheriff won't allow that. The sheriff and his eldest sons head to town for a meeting, and Harold is left behind. He daydreams about being sheriff, donning his dad's badge and gun. He gets into an altercation with Hank, and the medicine show performers are initially frightened of him, but then see his buffoonery when he's alone. Since he's wearing the badge, they think he's the sheriff and convince him to sign the permit, allowing them to perform. At the town meeting, money for a dam has been raised, and the council decides to leave it with the sheriff for safekeeping, but one of his detractors casts doubt on whether or not they can trust him. The detractor is outvoted by the rest of the council, though, and the dam money goes to the sheriff. The next day, Harold and Mary meet formally after Mary is harassed by Sandoni. She's charmed by Harold, but still doesn't know who he really is, thinking he's the sheriff. When Harold realizes her mistake, he's quick to correct her, but she admires his modesty. That night, we witness Harold's clever method for quickly washing and drying dishes, while his father drafts a letter to the state treasurer regarding the dam money. He has his elder sons sign it too, and when Harold asks if he can sign it as well, his father agrees, much to Harold's excitement. Unfortunately, the celebration is short-lived when a neighbor asks the sheriff whether he'll be at the medicine show. The sheriff says he doesn't know anything about such a show, and his older sons look just as confused. So they realize pretty immediately what happened. Harold's father pins the sheriff's badge on Harold and orders him to go and shut down the show. But when he gets there, Flash incorporates him into his act before tying him up to a trapeze. Here he meets Josephine. Harold's father shows up at the show just as Harold accidentally knocks over a flame, setting the stage on fire. The entire medicine show burns down, and Mary can do nothing but watch. Harold realizes the least he can do is offer her a place to stay, so he takes her to his house, setting up a private space for her to sleep with a curtain, until a matronly neighbor arrives and insists it isn't decent for her to stay in a house without any other women. Harold tricks his brothers into believing Mary is still at the house by staying hidden behind the curtain, resulting in them waiting on him hand and foot. The next morning, Flash and Sandoni read in the paper that the money for the dam is being held at the sheriff's house, and they plan to steal it. Harold, after narrowly escaping a beating from his brothers, meets Mary again and asks her to join him at the celebration for the dam, but when they head over, something is clearly wrong. A passerby tells them that the money was stolen. Sure enough, the money is gone, and the sheriff realizes it must be the men from the medicine show. Harold's older brothers go to find them, and Harold is left behind, but Mary tells him she believes in him and gives him a kiss. The townsfolk recognize Mary from the show and think she's in on the robbery and that Harold is trying to help her escape. Mary gets dragged away and Harold is knocked unconscious, falling into a boat drifting on the river. The younger of the two brothers can't find a trace of Flash or Sandoni, casting further doubt on the sheriff's innocence. When Harold comes to, he finds the boat has carried him to an abandoned ship. He sees the monkey from the show above him, and she drops a paper that he recognizes as the letter he and his family signed. He climbs aboard the ship, now trapped with the thieves. At this point, the movie almost seems to morph in some ways into a horror movie. The setting, the lighting, the suspense, it's like Steve from Blue's Clues wandered onto the set of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is partly because, adding to the terror, Sandoni catches Flash trying to pocket extra money for himself. An enraged Sandoni attacks Flash, nearly exposing Harold's various hiding spots before Sandoni finally kills Flash. The monkey proves to be more of a villain in this movie as she reveals Harold to Sandoni, and an intricate chase sequence ensues until Harold manages to hide in a closet. The monkey again tries to sell him out, but he puts a pair of shoes on her and sets her loose, so Sandoni is pursuing the monkey instead of Harold. It's one of the most memorable sequences in the film. She gives Harold time to recover the damn money, just not enough time. The ruse is up before he can escape. They end up fighting and Harold is obviously outmatched, leading to one of my absolute favorite gags in the movie. Part of what makes this so effective, though, is this is properly threatening. We just saw this man murder another guy. The chase and the fight have real stakes. If Sandoni gets a hold of Harold, he will kill him, and he really seems to be trying to. Anyway, eventually Sandoni falls into the water of the half-capsized ship, and it turns out he can't swim. So Harold holds the man underwater until he's unconscious, but doesn't kill him. Instead, he ties him up, but while gathering the money, Sandoni comes to and unties himself. Harold finally captures him via life preservers and uses him as a boat. Back at home, the second brother returns, also unable to find the money or the thieves, and the sheriff is arrested. An angry mob forms as he and Mary are taken to jail. One of the angry townsfolk even brandishes a noose at one point, but Harold is on the way, rolling Sandoni toward the town and then taking him by a horse-drawn carriage. He stops in front of the mob, setting the record straight, and he and Mary walk off into the sunset together with their arms around each other. The end. Lloyd's character in the film exudes a kind of optimism that we don't really see from Chaplin or Keaton. Harold Lloyd has more of this sort of like relatable everyman quality to his character. He was also a movie-making machine by comparison. It is estimated that he probably made over 300 movies, which is more than Keaton and Chaplin's catalogs combined. Unfortunately, the vast majority of those have been lost, but luckily, you know, a lot of the newer ones when he had the glasses character, those have been preserved. I also think it minimizes him as a filmmaker to call him just a stunt comedian. This movie in particular showcases what he can do with story and character. There's a lot going on with both the story and the characterization. And I think what makes the ending so effective is the suspense that he learned from having those daredevil moments in his other movies. You know, it's just he doesn't need to be hanging from a clock to do that. He can just have the bad guy creeping up behind him. Not to mention that there are several chase sequences where it's just gag after gag, nothing's ever repeated, everything's always unique, everything's always new. I would argue that his movies in general have the most action in them, and he's always on to the next thing almost before you can even digest what you just saw. I got really into Harold Lloyd when I was just starting high school, which was a good long time ago now. I looked it up, apparently it was April of 2003, but he was featured as the star of the month on Turner Classic Movies. This was kind of a big deal because unlike Chaplin and Keaton, a lot of people hadn't seen very much of Harold Lloyd. A lot of this was actually because of Lloyd himself. He owned the rights to all of his films, which was kind of a blessing and a curse. It sounds like a good thing, but it also meant that he could be and was very selective about where his movies were shown. You know, he didn't just want them shown like anywhere by anyone. But that meant that while Chaplin and Keaton's films were being watched and studied, a lot of people hadn't actually seen many Harold Lloyd movies. So all of this to say, it was kind of a big deal when a myriad of his shorts and features were being shown on TCM, and then they also released a DVD collection that was just called the Harold Lloyd Collection. I got it, I believe, for Christmas the following year, and there's original soundtracks for all these movies. Carl Davis did the one for the Kid Brother. It's like burned into my memory. It's very much like in the way that like any movie has a score. It's like that is the score to the Kid Brother as far as I'm concerned. And it's kind of a miracle, I think, that the DVDs have lasted and held up as long as they have. And if it weren't for TCM, despite my taking film classes in high school and earning a film degree in college, I wouldn't know this guy existed. You know, I would maybe have a passing recognition of the clock sequence and that would be it. Anyway, I could go on forever, but I won't. If any of this is like of any interest to you and you're not familiar with silent movies, and especially Lloyd and Keaton, I can't recommend them highly enough. The good news is it's a lot easier to get a hold of now. Much of it is online and a lot of it's public domain. Also, if you like the gags, but the silent films are like just a little bit too far, it's like, no, I can't do it, I gotta have some sort of sound. Both of them did talkies as well. And considering their backgrounds, those movies tend to be very gag-based as well. And a lot of them are actually pretty freaking good. So yeah, you can look those up too. And if you want to do some further reading, I'm linking all of my resources below. The only thing that's not included down there is the Glenn Mitchell audio commentary, which is on the TCM Buster Keaton Collection DVD. Yeah, go watch some movies. Oh, Curio, you're gonna be great for continuity.